get a proper rate of return, that is when you see a flight of capital. That is when, under extreme conditions, they decide to move out. It is not easy to set up businesses outside Pakistan. हम लोग यहाँ पले जमे हैं, हमें यहाँ हमारे कॉन्टैक्ट्स होते हैं. मैं देखता हूँ जो बाहर जाते हैं, इट्स नॉट मिल्क एंड हनी. आजकल तो बाहर पैसा रखवाना भी बड़ा मुश्किल हो गया है. So everybody wants to stay here, have the business, make money and reinvest here. The perception that has been created over decades of negative thinking that Amir Admi jo hai chor hai, that has to be gotten rid of. Ye impression ki wealth creation is a sin, it has to be gotten rid of. And Prime Minister साहब ने बहुत दफा बड़ा क्लियरली कहा है कि आप अगर अपने टैक्सेस दे रहे हैं और वेल्थ क्रिएट कर रहे हैं, nobody will touch you. That is what we have to lead this whole discussion into. ये जो सारे इधर जो 50% मसले मसाइल डिस्कस किए गए हैं वो FBR के किए गए हैं, और मैं इस अदारे में इसका रेवेन्यू मिनिस्टर 3 साल रह चुका हूँ. सो आई कैन एसोसिएट विद दैट. देखिए, मैंने अभी एक जो प्रिलिमिनरी हमारी मीटिंग थी, मैंने इसमें कहा था टैक्स कलेक्शन इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर इन द वर्ल्ड. दुनिया में कोई टैक्स डिटरेंस के बगैर नहीं देता, बट डिटरेंस शुड रिमेन ए डिटरेंस, और एक्चुअल पीनलाइज और पेनल्टी और एक्शन मजबूरी में लेना होता है. और ये इकोनॉमी का और जीडीपी का जब तक पहिया घूमता रहेगा तो टैक्स कलेक्शन बढ़ता जाएगा. पहिए को रोक के टैक्स कलेक्ट करना जो होता है दुनिया में कभी कामयाब नहीं हुआ. देयर इज ऑलवेज एन ऑप्टिमम लेवल कि आपने डिटरेंस कितनी करनी है, प्रेशर कितना करना है और टैक्स कितना कलेक्ट करना है, आपने कितने रेट्स रखने हैं. जितना रेट आगे करेंगे और जितनी डिटरेंस करेंगे उतनी चोरी बढ़ेगी और उतनी करप्शन बढ़ेगी. सो यू हैव टू हैव ए बैलेंस ऑन दैट एंड वी आर वर्किंग ऑन दैट. अब मैं आपको एक बात बता दूं कि इतनी आप लोगों ने सही और अच्छी बातें की. ये जो बिलवानी साहब ने बताया कि लोग फॉरेन नेशनैलिटी में कितने पैसे खर्च कर रहे हैं और बाहर जो पैसे लेके जा रहे हैं और फैक्ट्री लगा रहे हैं उसके अंदर कितना इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं. दीज आर ऑल दी रिजल्ट्स ऑफ द लैक ऑफ ट्रस्ट or the lack of confidence of the business community to keep their money here. मैं आपको इन सारी चीज़ों को इनकॉर्पोरेट करके आपका एक एक चीज़ का जवाब दे के जाऊँगा, जल्दी जल्दी से दूंगा, बट मैं एक आप बता दूँ कि इन द फर्स्ट वीक ऑफ स्टार्टिंग माई रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी इन इस्लामाबाद मैंने प्राइम मिनिस्टर साहब से 7 कमेटीज़ की इन प्रिंसिपल अप्रूवल ले ली. The way the Prime Minister of Pakistan works, I often say that he doesn't walk, he doesn't jog, he runs and he runs up on his toes. And it's very difficult for the ministers to catch up with him. But we must make use of that. Prime Minister cannot do everything himself. We, his ministers, have to support him and move shoulder to shoulder with him in order to accomplish his mission and in order to make this country prosperous. अच्छा, ये committees क्या है? Now I'm going to go very fast. सबसे पहले इस मुल्क में कोई bankruptcy law नहीं है. Can you imagine that? उसका नतीजा क्या होता है कि 90 दिन में आपका क्रेडिट इंफॉर्मेशन ब्यूरो में अगर नाम आ जाता है तो कोई बैंक आपको, जो पहली बड़ी मुश्किल है एक्सेस टू कैपिटल, कोई बैंक आपको करीब नहीं आता. इसका मतलब है कि आपको ब्रीदिंग स्पेस ही नहीं मिलती. अच्छा, अब जो मसले आ रहे हैं क्रेडिट इंफॉर्मेशन ब्यूरो में नाम आने के, वो 90% उन वजह से आ रहे हैं जो मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक इंडिकेटर्स खराब होने की वजह से हुए थे. क्यों? मार्कअप रेट ज़्यादा थे. क्यों? एनर्जी रेट ज़्यादा थे. क्यों? कॉर्पोरेट टैक्स रेट ज़्यादा थे. तो उसमें अगर हम एक बिजनेसमैन को प्रोटेक्शन क्रेडिटर्स नहीं दे सकते और एक अपॉर्चुनिटी नहीं दे सकते कि वो अपने आप को रिस्ट्रक्चर करें, तो दैट्स अ फेलियर ऑफ द सिस्टम. So that committee has been accepted, and inshallah very soon we are going to come up with a bankruptcy law to protect those people जो विदाउट देयर फॉल्ट एक ऐसी सिचुएशन में आ गए हैं कि उनको अगर सपोर्ट ना की जाए तो फैक्ट्री बंद होगी। पहली बात। दूसरी बात, कमेटी की जो अप्रूवल हुई है, रिवाइवल ऑफ 6 यूनिट्स। यू सी, वी हैव और हैड ए करंट अकाउंट डेफिसिट क्राइसिस। क्या होता है कि द मोमेंट आवर जीडीपी ग्रोथ क्रॉसेस 2 or 3%, we have pressure on the reserves. Why? Because our exports do not increase with the same pace of imports. Why? Because we have become an import-dependent economy. Why? Because in certain cases we have had free trade agreements which we were not fully ready for. In all honesty, they were the right things to do, but there is no harm in revisiting them. There is a general perception that the days of import substitution are gone. If that perception is correct, then America, with all that advanced technology, why did America have to impose these super tariffs? They are imposing the super tariffs not just for negotiating purposes, but to revive their dead manufacturing sector. If America could not compete with all their volumes, how can Pakistan compete? So what has happened is that even for domestic consumption, we have not been able to protect those industries which we saw 30 years ago. The proliferation of the industrial sector with small things like lights and bulbs and chandeliers and woodwork and all, it's all now imported, raw material. We never allowed them or protected them enough for them to be competitive. The protection is not given forever. It's given with a sunset clause. Okay? So there has to be a fine line between adequate protection, reasonable protection, and on the other extreme, more than necessary protection. We do not want to spoil or make the industry uncompetitive, but in order for them to start, we have to give them some protection. The whole policy now should be based on export-led industrialization. That is very important. Because what have we done? If today we reach 5% growth, we can, it's not a problem. But it will put pressure on the reserve. What did China do? What did Vietnam do? What did Bangladesh do? What did India do? They built up their reserves first. Because if you do not build up your reserves, you will keep on going back to IMF. So how do you build up your reserves? People say foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment comes in when domestic investment comes in first. Then it follows the domestic investment. Domestic investors will attract the foreign investment. दुनिया में ये हुआ है. And how do you grow your exports exponentially? By doing everything you can, bending backwards to make sure your export industry is competitive. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have high tax rates and high power rates and high markup rates and then expect your exporters to compete in the rest of the world. You can't. You have to make sure, you have to listen to them. I am a firm believer, and so is the Prime Minister of Pakistan. I mean, how many times all you businessmen have been in Islamabad? And he listens to you, and he's a patient he can make without hearing the stakeholders. I am not an expert in all these sectors. I may be an expert in the businesses I run, but this is national policy. I have to see you guys, and I have to make sure that what you're saying, I understand it, and then we bring it in the policy, and we make sure these small irritants and these small things which are impeding our growth, it gets out of the way. I don't believe in too much regulation. Example of Turkey. When Turkey Prime Minister or President Erdogan is still there. Why? Because of the economic revival he brought into Turkey. And why? Because I remember his statement when he came in. He said that I will convert Turkey from a regulatory state to a developmental state. That is what we have to do. We cannot keep on mistrusting our businesses, mistrusting our industrialists. We can't do that. Give them everything they need. Open up the economy. That is the only way we are going to reach new heights. By not believing in your industrialists. They talk of the 50s and the 60s. I opened up my eyes in the 60s. I know that era. It was an era of industrialization. And Pakistan was respected everywhere in the world because of that. We were ahead. I know these charts. We were ahead of everybody. I mean, it's now a cliche that we had a 5-year program and South Korea copied it. That's true. So, and this nation has seen exports doubling in 5 years, revenues doubling in 5 years, everything. We've done it. It's not that we can't do it. We've done it. So, and I tell you, in 4 weeks, what I've seen in Islamabad, a lot of people are doing a lot of hard work. It's just the coordination of different ministries and carrying the vision of the Prime Minister ahead. I think that needs a little bit of improvement. And the Prime Minister, I was talking to a consultant that we have hired, an international consultant, to make the industrial policy, talking of the industrial policy. And I'm going to bring him an industrial policy. Pakistan hasn't had an industrial policy so far in 75, 77 years of its history. I will, inshallah, not leave without giving you people an industrial policy. And that consultant said a lot of other things, a lot of the things that all of you are saying. I mean, there was no rocket science. But 2 things what he said. The condition Pakistan is in, going back a little bit, consultants are only as good as their clients. So if we do not give them information that they require, they're no good. And I like consultants only for the fact because they tell us what other countries have done and how other countries got out of the crisis that we've been facing. That experience they have because they have consulted with a number of countries. So he said 2 things. The way Pakistan is right now and the handicap always that we face on the foreign exchange reserves is you cannot keep on depending on remittances because that is some other nation's productivity, not your productivity. So it's just filling in the gap and there is no permanence in it. The only route to success for Pakistan is export-led industrialization. And he said, these are his words, which resonate with all of what you have said and what I think, is you've got to give everything possible to make your export industry competitive. And that has to be translated into action. There is no reason why you guys cannot increase your export and we talk of these 30 billion, 60 billion and 80 billion. If we make you competitive, we cannot expect miracles from you. A lot of negativity flows in saying that our businessmen are overly protected and our businessmen make a lot of money and they hide it and all that. There may be some. This in every country. But that's not the general ground reality. It is not. So one is export-led industrialization, and the second thing what he said, and which reinforced my belief that under the administration of Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif, we can take a giant leap. And he said there has to be a special high-powered cell in the Prime Minister's Secretariat which takes care and monitors the implementation of all the decisions taken. And this Prime Minister has it. And you know he's brought in, and I've worked with those people, I don't want to name them. Some of them are really good, because a lot of things get stuck because of small things, not big things. The bigger picture is very clear in Islamabad, what we need. All what you've said, everybody is clear. But how to bring together the loose ends and make a strategy and move ahead in a huge government, that is the governance which I think we have the potential to do. So now one by one, the bankruptcy law, the sick units, harassment. Which businessman is sitting here and listening to me who hasn't gone through harassment of investigative agencies, including tax collecting agencies? None. We all have faced it. That doesn't mean that everybody is kosher and an angel. In every economy, even in America, people get caught with cheating and all that. But you cannot generalize that. NAB, FIA, all these things. So NAB has gotten a lot better. I want to make a firewall against the corporate sector, that before an investigative agency attacks, maybe for the right reasons, but before they pick and choose a corporate sector for investigation, they have to go through a check. Maybe SECP, maybe State Bank of Pakistan, maybe FPCCI, maybe Karachi Chamber, that we will decide. We would like to make that firewall against that. And that doesn't mean that we are going to spare the people who are actually doing the wrong thing. But that means that we are going to not let these agencies affect the people who are not doing the wrong things. Okay, so that another committee is going to be formed, and we're going to change the rules or make some laws. Protection of investment. I was the architect of the first amnesty policy, the 2018, because there was a new regime of exchange of information that was being brought in. And I felt, and a lot of businessmen had spoken to me, that give us one. And I don't call that amnesty. And it was very difficult to get it through. We called it Voluntary Asset Declaration Scheme. And I fought for it strongly, because I opened the net and I saw that America offered that, Turkey offered that, Scandinavian countries offered that, and this name, Voluntary Asset Declaration Scheme, I copied from Canada. They allowed it. So why not Pakistan? Now, the reason I brought this up is almost $15 billion were declared, some in liquid money and some in fixed assets. That scheme was followed by another government in 2019. And about a similar amount of money, only $500 million came to Pakistan. Why? Nobody has any fun keeping money outside anymore, even if it's declared now. But people are not yet sure that if they bring their money in, whether they'll be able to take it out or not. So I want to review the 1992 Protection of Economic Reforms Act that was brought in by the Prime Minister, Nawaz Sharif, and which opened up our economy to the extent that in 1997, when we had sanctions because of the nuclear explosion that we did,